Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, I'd like to share with you some interesting thoughts on how to attack. And I brought as help some classic interesting games to start with. The first example is a game by the late world champion Alexander Alekhine against one of the greatest endgame players of that era, Akiba Rubinstein. They have reached this position after 23 moves, and right now we still have even material balance. However, there is one thing we immediately see in the position what's going on. Black is missing a pawn on h7. Moreover, their king is on h8, not on g8. So that obviously calls for a mating attack and calls for the dream, for the aim on getting your queen quickly to the h file. In fact, if you could imagine your queen getting over somewhere to h5 or h4 or h3, checking the black king, that would force a checkmate in 2 moves. The problem is that that doesn't seem to be so simple. For example, if the white queen would retreat to c4, so then it would go to e2 and h5, that is quite a lengthy maneuver. That's 3 moves. Obviously, black would have plenty of time in the meantime to prepare for that and prevent that. However, that maneuver kind of takes forever. So the question is, how can white achieve something in aiding the attack or getting the queen over to the h file timely before black would get his queen into the game, for example to e5, or play moves like g6 followed by bishop g7, in which case even if the white queen gets over to the h file, it may not be that dangerous at all for black. Well, time is the essence, and Alekhine found an absolutely brilliant move. For a human, of course, it's certainly challenging, but even for a computer, it takes a little bit of time before it comes to the right conclusion. And that amazing move is to play bishop to g6. This is a brilliant move in that it opens up the e4 square for white's queen to then arrive quickly to h4. Also, at the same time, it targets black's f7 pawn. So black needs to react to 2 threats all at once. First, let's check out what happens if indeed black accepts the sacrifice. As we know, always, first, it has to be checked when you sacrifice something, what if the opponent simply accepts it? Because at the end of the day, in those situations, you would be down material. And you want to make sure that you'll either win the material back or checkmate your opponent and don't just stay behind for no reason. So now the queen would come immediately to e4, threatening on one hand with a check on h4, as well as to capture the pawn on g6 and then simply checkmate on h7. What happens if now the black bishop goes to d6 with the idea to prepare some escape square for the king on f8? Well, it's true that it's not checkmate yet, but you don't have to wait too long to achieve that anyway. 5 more moves and it's checkmate. Try to figure it out before you go further. What is the correct sequence of moves? Starts out, check, and check again, and check again, bishop blocks, check again, and the final check ends the game. Very nice. Going back to the game and looking at the position after bishop g6, it's not hard to get convinced that if black would respond with king g8, white after queen c4 would still achieve pretty similar plans as we just saw. However, the game after bishop to g6 continued with black responding with queen e5. Now, black is attacking the white knight on g5 as well as the bishop is hanging too. So now, change of plans. White simply takes the material he can by knight f7. It's a nice family fork. Black must capture with the rook. And as we can see now, white simply is an exchange and the pawn up, while white still has attacking chances on the h-file. Just a few more moves before the game ended. Black played queen f5, almost trapping the bishop on f7, but not quite. White responded with rook fd1, a very fine move, attacking black's rook, offering the exchange of rooks, which black pretty much must accept. And now queen captured bishop, but the bishop on c8 was hanging too. The material advantage is still there for white, and here comes another pawn. And after queen f3, white happily transposed the game to an easily won endgame with queen d3, forcing the trade, and black resigned. Let's move on to our second example, a game that was played in East Germany between Grandmaster Knack and Malich. In this position, white clearly already has achieved something, namely the fact that the white queen is on h7 and the black king had to go to f8 because white had a supporting piece on b1. In such situations, oftentimes the follow-up is to play queen h8 to chase the king further out to the middle of the board. However, in this case, because the white knight is on e5, blocking up the e-file, so in other words, after queen h8 check king e7, there is no check by the white rook getting to e1. So therefore, all of a sudden, the white queen is being attacked and the white queen will have to retreat, which certainly makes no progress for white. So therefore, in this position, white better looks for a different way to continue. A typical move to look at here would be to play rook f to e1 to prepare. In other words, to threaten, then play queen h8 check, and then when the king moves to e7, a discovered check with the knight. While this may be playable as well, the problem may be that black would capture on e5. However, white had a better approach right now, a different one, and that is to play knight f7. How do you think of such a move? Well, you should try to envision different geometrical motifs or different tactical ideas. And in this case, that is the fact that after king captures, the white bishop from b1 is ready to come into action and create an immediate skewer. Now, if the king goes to f8, things end pretty bad and quick because of the check followed by checkmate. So therefore, after the bishop g6 check, the king better goes to e7 right away. Now black's hope is that white would give the check, and then black be ready to block the check and hang on to the game. But white can do better, and they did, capturing the rook on e8, king captured back, and as you can see, the forceful moves come one after another. Queen g8. If right now king d7, getting out of the check, then rook e1 would be rather powerful, threatening with a checkmate on e8. And if the bishop blocks that plan, then white simply grabs another pawn. So how do we evaluate this position? Well, white has an extra rook and 2 pawns versus black's 2 bishops. So that is a little bit of material advantage to start with. However, the major problem for black is that their king will never find quite safety ever in this game. Moreover, white has right now an immediate threat. For example, if black would respond with b6, trying to develop the other bishop, white immediately has a little combination. White check, followed by rook c7, and then capturing the queen. Okay, let's go back again. After queen g8 check, the actual game continued with black playing queen f8. Now, naturally, we bring a new piece to the attack. Rook e1 check. Bishop e7 is the only move that is hanging on. And now, a bit similarly to the previous combination we just saw, rook sacrifice on e7, king captures back, and rook e1, and black is facing major trouble. Even though black can avoid losing the queen right away by playing bishop e6, white will just capture it and then capture another pawn, being up 2 pawns while maintaining a dangerous attack against black's king. Therefore, black resigned. Let's move on to our next example. Here we go. And this is also from a real game played by Winans as white and Abing as black from 1997. We can see in this position that white has sacrificed a pawn, however achieved something very meaningful, namely that the bishop is on h6, which is really important because the black king is on g8 and the rook on h8 still in the corner. And in such situation, the black rook really has a hard time getting out of there because that bishop on h6 does not let the black king get to g7 and then the rook to come out of the corner. Nevertheless, black would be trying to do something like playing maybe f6 and then king f7 and then getting the rook out of the corner. At the end of the day, if black succeeds with that plan and maintains the extra pawn, we'll be doing very well. So, the bottom line is, time is the essence. White must come up with a powerful plan before black escapes from its cramped position. It is quite important in such situations to look for forceful and powerful moves that have immediate threats. Oftentimes, these type of moves involve even a sacrifice. Let's see this example. White plays knight f5. Well, the threat is real clear and powerful. Knight takes pawn, checkmate. So the first thing to examine in such situation is, what if pawn just captures? Well, the good news now is that the G file has been opened up. So if white would get a linear piece like a queen or a rook to the G file to attack the black king with the help of the bishop on h6, that would pretty much mean the end of the game for black. So therefore, the follow-up would be to play queen h5, threatening with queen g5, which would end the game rather quickly. If right now black would hurry up with the queen to the defense to go to g6, the problem is the bishop would be lost immediately with rook e5. Now, if black proceeds with queen g6, white doesn't need to worry about wasting time in moving the queen away, but could follow up with rook e7. And if queen takes, of course, checkmate arrives. Let's go back again and see some other options. Knight f5, captures, queen h5, queen b6, rook captured the bishop. If now queen f6, the most powerful move is to bring yet another piece to the attack by playing rook a3. Now we can see how powerful it is the way the white pieces are coordinated and attacking. Let's go back one more time. Knight f5, pawn takes, queen h5. Let's look at another move like bishop to f6, which protects the g5 square. The problem is it no longer protects the g3 square. Now white would therefore play rook e3 and again threaten to checkmate with rook g3. If f4, the problem is the queen is hanging and moreover checkmate arrives immediately. Or, if black would try to play queen c7 in this position, white could even play rook a to a3, not even allowing, giving the queen up for the rook on g3 after an immediate check. And black is completely lost here. Okay, let's go back again. Knight f5, we know the threat, knight e7. What if black now simply protects that with queen c5? Well, certainly a logical move, but white has a brilliant answer to it. Namely, queen d5, sacrificing the queen. Now if queen takes queen, knight e7 checkmate, and otherwise black will lose the queen. And finally, let's see how the game itself continued. After knight f5, black responded by playing f6, making a little escape window for the king on f7. The response was the simple but effective knight takes pawn, king f7, and now knight takes bishop, simply removing the guard of the d7 pawn. Black resigned because after rook takes back, queen d7 doesn't just win a pawn, but results in checkmate on the next move. Let's go back to this position and try to draw some conclusions. Why this combination worked? Well, it did because black is so underdeveloped. The black rook, in fact both rooks, are in the corner, still having a very hard time to get developed. So is black's light squared bishop, still not ready to develop. White has an amazing bishop on h6, not allowing the untangling of black's king's position. The white rook on e1 is already active. And there is already a checkmate pattern in the air, namely the white knight coming to e7. As we saw, the beautiful demonstration on how tactically all of this works out shows how important it is, the development in the early stages of the game. Black never got out of the opening in this game. Let's see the next example. Here we go. In this example, it was white's turn, and black at the moment is a pawn up, although white could win the pawn back by capturing it on e4. However, white can play much more powerful and aggressively. Very typical for such situation that we want to open up files, or diagonals rather in this case, for our active bishops. And the best move is the way Grandmaster Onischuk played, e6. It's immediately attacking black's knight as well as making the e-pawn a very far advanced and dangerous one. Black captured the pawn on e6. If the knight would have moved away, white would simply capture on f7 with a check, and after king h8, capture the pawn on c5, attacking the rook on f8. And after bishop f5, the follow-up move would be bishop d6, putting further attack on the rook as well as opening up the attack on the bishop. Black would be in major trouble. After e6, black responded by pawn takes, and now there is a new problem, namely that after the knight moves away, there is a discovered check in the air. In fact, it's not really in the air, it's in reality. White would play e7 immediately, even though that is a queen sacrifice. Knight captures queen, pawn captures and promotes to a queen, king captures back, and even though black seems to be winning now, they don't. In fact, white is the one winning. Double check with the bishop, king e8, bishop b5 check, and whether black blocks the check or moves the king, rook f8 checkmates. Quite brilliant. Again, black was suffering in this game as well because of lack of development. We can see the pattern how that the black rook in the corner on a8 and the bishop on c8 still completely undeveloped. causes black's trouble. Because of that, the back rank is not sufficiently protected. And let's see now, finally, the jewel of the week. Here we go. In this position, there are only 2 bishops left for white, and black has a knight and 2 pawns. Normally, such an endgame should be a draw. However, if white succeeds in winning the black knight, the 2 bishops will win quite easily, even though black still has 2 pawns left. Amazingly, in this position, white real quickly can win the black knight, or even worse, checkmate black. Try to figure out what is the key winning move right now. And the answer to that is bishop c6, simply attacking the knight. If right now the knight moves to e7, then white successfully can force the black king into a fork and then win the knight. If after bishop c6 the knight goes to b4, voila, checkmate. Or if after bishop c6 the knight moves to b6, then the checkmate comes from c3 and game over. A very nice composition, in fact only the end of it, by Braun. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned some more attacking and tactical ideas. So long until next week.